We're already reaching this really diverse audience that we maybe wouldn't have from some traditional marketing. And beyond that, we see that these people are now interested in coming to visit Fort Worth after seeing Fort Worth on the screen. We did some research recently and found that overall, everyone's perception of the city had improved or remained neutral after seeing Fort Worth on the screen, and that viewers were 2 times more likely to visit Fort Worth after watching a show that was filmed here.
That's the voice of Taylor Hardy, Fort Worth's film commissioner. She's here to share how Fort Worth's film industry is giving the local economy and the community's brand a boost. We talk about their strategies, including a local film-specific job training program, insights into how filming locations are chosen, and what's next if you want to tap into how film and TV production could benefit your area. Learn more about this podcast at livabilitymedia.com. And with that, let's jump in. Welcome, Taylor, to Inside America's Best Cities. We're super excited to have you and talk about a fun topic today.
Thank you. Yeah, film in Fort Worth has just been growing so dramatically over the past 10 years, and I'm excited to share more about how we've been able to make that happen.
Yes, we're super excited to hear about that. And I think this is the first time we've had a topic like this in terms of the film industry and how that can really support communities on the podcast. So excited to jump in more. So I know the Fort Worth area has seen some significant growth in this industry in recent years. Maybe you can define that a little bit more for us on kind of when that started. But how did that become a thing? Like, what was the initial vision that led to that really becoming more of a pillar of the local economy?
Yeah, so the Fort Worth Film Commission launched about 10 years ago in October 2015. At the time, we were the only major city in Texas that didn't have its own film commission. We are kind of in this Metroplex area, so Dallas is our neighbor just 30 miles to the east, and they were kind of representing the region. But without someone on the ground in Fort Worth who really knew our locations, our local businesses, and our community, we just didn't have anyone who was advocating for us. So we ended up losing a lot of business to Dallas. I also think it was important for us in Fort Worth because we have this Western flair that people think of when they think of Texas, but you really have to come here to get it. So it's been a great opportunity for some of our locations to be able to be involved in this process and get showcased through film and TV, music videos, all kinds of creative projects.
Yeah. So when you talked about you were the only place in Texas that didn't have like an entity or person kind of dedicated to this process, is that pretty normal in cities in general? That there's like a point person or point organization for that sort of thing?
Yeah, in Texas, you can have a film commission office, which is more of a structured organization to be a resource, but we also have film-friendly cities. There are over 200 across the state. It's basically that point person where if you want to film in that region, you have someone who can explain the permit process and answer questions and guide you through the process.
Okay. So you decided several years ago that you all needed to kind of create that, and then it's just really taken off since then, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. I think we really see Fort Worth and Visit Fort Worth as this entertainment brand. So it's about, not just bringing people for meetings and conventions, but what are you doing on your trip outside of that? From sports to music, any kind of entertainment, seeing a film, culinary. So we like to represent all of these things that people can do. And film was just kind of that missing piece we needed.
How do you feel like overall it's really contributed to Fort Worth's overall brand, especially from a national perspective, which you started to touch on?
I think awareness has been huge. We've been really fortunate to have a variety of different films and TV shows, things like Taylor Sheridan's 1883 or Landman, also independent films like 12 Mighty Orphans starring Luke Wilson and Martin Sheen, music videos like Kendrick Lamar's N95. So we're already reaching this really diverse audience that we maybe wouldn't have from some traditional marketing. And beyond that, we see that these people are now interested in coming to visit Fort Worth after seeing Fort Worth on the screen. We did some research recently and found that overall, everyone's perception of the city had improved or remained neutral after seeing Fort Worth on the screen. It was all positive, and that viewers were 2 times more likely to visit Fort Worth after watching a show that was filmed here.
Huh. How often, I guess, do people know where the things they're watching are actually created? Because I guess it depends on what it is, right? I mean, there are some shows and movies where the location is like practically its own character because it revolves around that in some way. I know we did a conference session like late last year, and we actually highlighted some different pieces of media that have really ended up shaping perceptions of a certain community for a long time. And so one of them was the movie Fargo. But the funny thing about it is most of that movie actually doesn't even take place there. It's like a different place in Minnesota. But just looking at how much that has really shaped perceptions of that place. And they didn't necessarily like ask for that, but they've had to roll with it, and it's kind of become part of their image, whether they liked it or not. So this stuff definitely does influence people's perceptions.
Definitely. But I think you bring up a good point there, too. There are so many projects that are about Texas that are being filmed in other places, like New Mexico and Oklahoma. So I think that's really why the Film Commission office is so important, to advocate to keep those projects here.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Like if you're going to talk about our state, you should just do it here in our state.
Exactly. Have Texans involved and have that authenticity that I think people are looking for in media.
Yes, that definitely makes sense. So I know I saw some numbers, $700 million economic impact, 30,000 jobs. Not sure how much like time those numbers span, but can you talk a little bit more about where that impact is really being felt within the local economy?
Right. So that's what we've been able to measure in the past 10 years since we launched the Film Commission. And I do think it's important to note those are based on projects that the Film Commission has had a hand in, not every project filming in the city. So ultimately, we're a resource for people, but we're not a reporting board. We're not requiring people to work with us. But we did have an opportunity to do some research where we broke down the budget for a drama high budget series. And we saw, about half of that is spent on screen sector specific expenses. But we also saw 10% of the budget was going towards construction costs. 9% was hospitality and catering. 8% on travel and transportation. We also saw music and performing arts and location fees and real estate as some bigger budget items. So when you're talking about a production that has a 50 million budget, 10% really adds up. And, that's supporting our lumber yards, our restaurants, retail shops. It's just really inspiring when we get to hear these case stories about businesses that are thriving and their whole year was made because one production came and supported them. Places like dry cleaners, or we have a vintage shop that a lot of the period pieces use for some of those time-specific clothing pieces. So it's been really exciting to see how it's impacted so many different businesses and such a variety of people.
Yeah, and so many things that you wouldn't necessarily think about going into that really is money going into the local economy. That makes sense.
Right. I think hotels is another interesting example because productions are happening all around the year. So we've been able to get people into hotel rooms during need times, like January on a Tuesday, that might be slow otherwise. But if there's a production in town, a lot of these crews are staying for longer term periods of time. Maybe it's a week or a few months. And so that's a lot of business that we didn't have before that's helped these hotels in areas that maybe you wouldn't necessarily think about right in the heart of the city. They're looking all across town and all times of the year.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So I want to talk a little bit about the Film Collaborative, the Fort Worth Film Collaborative, which I gather is an education initiative, but can you talk more about what that is exactly?
Yeah, so we are so proud of the trained crew that we have in Fort Worth. But as we've grown and we've seen more productions choosing to film in the city, we just had this need for even more locals that are ready to work on set. So this started as a fast track certification program in 3 specific areas. It was grip and electric, set construction, and hair and makeup. And the idea was focusing on trades. And we've got great universities that are providing film degrees and helping people to pursue careers as directors or actors or producers. This is really specific to production and where we saw these gaps. So it's things like an electrician who already has this great knowledge of this trade and providing them with the training to apply that to work on a set.
Yeah, that's really neat. So you've got, it sounds like a range of participants in that, like people that are maybe starting their career and passionate about specifically applying that to this industry, and also people that maybe have experience in the industry and are just looking for a new way to apply that.
Exactly. It's been really diverse, and we tried to make sure this program was built around work and family. So there's options for virtual classes or training on the weekends or at night.
Very cool. Is that through the community college?
Yes, we've partnered with Tarrant County College and also 101 Studios, which is the production company behind Taylor Sheridan shows. They've been such a great partner in helping us with that pipeline piece. So these graduates have then had the opportunity to apply for positions with them. And I've actually seen some success there with students that have worked on the set of Lioness Season 2. And we now have someone with a full-time position on Landman. So it's been exciting to see that.
So for people coming out of that program and working on these projects, because it does seem like this would be a very project-based type of industry, does that mean that their jobs potentially could be like more, contract-based versus like working full time forever for a local entity?
I think it depends. In the film industry, your network is so important. So just having the opportunity to meet these people could lead to other positions. Sometimes there are opportunities that are more full time, like if you're working in a rental house and helping advise on gear. So it's just kind of up to the person and what they're looking for. But we are seeing that these are high paid jobs on set for these trades, and you are able to make a living by working on a few big productions a year. So I think that's why it's so important for us to just try to make sure we're attracting work so they can have that consistency in a year-round job.
Yeah, even though that might look a little different for everybody. Yeah, I mean, that's so specific. Like the skill set is so specific. It makes sense that, yeah, there wouldn't be just a ton of people floating around out there that know those things. So that's really neat. I know another thing is just more financial incentives for these projects, like 20+% cash rebate, kind of a development zone for media production. Can you talk a little bit more about those and how that's helped to draw projects?
Totally. So when you think about a good film destination, producers are really looking for three things. It's trained crew, which we've already talked about, it's infrastructure, and film incentives. Because at the end of the day, this is a business. They're going to choose the location that makes the most sense for them from a financial perspective so they can do more for the project and make sure that they're finding the best fit. So the Media Production Development Zone really addresses that piece on infrastructure and the need for purpose-built studios. When we were just getting started, we were able to adapt some spaces for stages and sets to be built. So these are things like airplane hangars, abandoned data centers, or warehouses. We had a production that used a former Amazon warehouse to build out some big sets, which is great. But as we're continuing to grow, we really need things that are designed with film in mind, places that are soundproof and wiring and electrical, and all of that is in place. So our media production development zone was just introduced. This is a film or a program administered by the Texas Film Commission, but it's approved on the local level before it goes to the state. So our city council voted to allow anything in Fort Worth city limits to have this sales and use tax exemption for developers looking to build a creative space like a studio. So we're really excited about that. It's a great way to incentivize people to choose our city when they're looking at where they want to base their production studio. And when we have that infrastructure in place, it allows more productions to come.
That definitely makes sense. I mean, we talk a lot on this podcast since it's very economic development focused on, drawing businesses in general and how, the economic piece of that has to work and be appealing. So it's really just that same idea, I guess, applied more specifically here.
Right. Because we've seen the return and how this business benefits our community with jobs and economic impact. So it just makes sense to support the infrastructure to allow for more of that.
So how do those incentives, how does it compare to what other communities or states or regions are doing? Like, are there just, different ones, different places? Is this one especially competitive, or is it unusual to have something like that?
Film incentives are really interesting. The first incentive program launched in the early 2000s, and since then we've seen this grow exponentially. So now over half of the US states have their own incentive program, and everyone is structured differently. In Texas, we really focus on creating jobs. You can currently have up to 22.5% cash rebate on qualified local spend or in-state spend. So that's local salaries, any spend with local businesses, but it doesn't incentivize actors that live out of state or any of those above the line crew that maybe a production is bringing in, which I think is really interesting because it's this push to make sure that we're hiring Texans and locals. There's also a percentage that productions are required to hire 55% of their cast and crew as Texans. So it's been really great for us to see more locals and Texans getting involved in production. And because of that, we've been able to track for every dollar in incentive funds, we have a $4.69 returned into the economy. I really think it is because the way our program is structured. It's not currently the most competitive program. There are neighboring states that are offering a higher percentage. So that's something that we are actively lobbying for and want to advocate to kind of just catch up and be on a competitive playing field with some of the other states. We've even seen places in Europe that are offering up to 40% rebates. So it's very competitive. I think that we'll hopefully be able to expand our program, but we also just benefit from people loving Texas and our locations and filming here. So an interesting puzzle to try to get all of those pieces to fit.
No, it really is. I mean, I've never thought about it before that, like, for these projects, if they're going to do it somewhere, like, they could go anywhere in the world, depending on what they're trying to depict, I guess. And making some of those decisions probably does come down to, yeah, the financial piece. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Right? We'd all love for it to just be about the creative, but at the end of the day, if you're talking about differences of millions of dollars, you have to look for the location that makes the most sense.
And I guess it depends, yeah, on what you're doing. Like if you're building some sort of set that's going to just be inside a giant building anyway, like you could kind of do that wherever, I guess. So, how interesting. So, I feel like you've kind of addressed this, but just to see if you have anything else to add in terms of the spillover effects of this industry, like we talked about the, additional dollars that funnels into the local economy, just the building on your brand, the exposure. You can definitely envision the talent attraction connections with that, of just that exposure, people maybe being like, hey, like I really like it here, and didn't know much about it before. But any other spillover effects of this you want to highlight?
I think you're exactly right. It's about people being proud of their community. And that's, any kind of creative endeavor, whether that's music or film, it's helping to support that nightlife economy. What are people doing at the end of the day? And, what are they saying about their city? When they see these cool things happening and there's this buzz creative, everyone gets excited. And, it's not just locals, other companies and people are seeing that too and deciding to choose Fort Worth. I think a really fun example is a new trend called cowboy core that we saw reported on. And it's just this fascination with the cowboy hats and boots and that Western culture. And so it's been fun to be able to see that portrayed in film and music and people taking an interest in Fort Worth because of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Any advice you would leave other, we've got listeners in the economic development space, anything you would share with them if they're thinking more about how they can make something like this benefit their community and where to start? I mean, it sounds like you all have had a lot of intentionality around a lot of different steps and it's been like a 10-year, process. But what would you say?
I would encourage everyone to start with your local community. That was really our first step is who are the crew members here? Who are the local production companies and what's their vision for what this could become? I don't think we ever imagined 10 years ago that we would have major TV shows based in Fort Worth and be able to see the impact that we have. And it really started with this local focus. If we have a great creative community, people will want to come. I think sometimes people think about, business attraction and pitching sales outward. And I think it's really helped us to focus on that hospitality and customer service aspect first.
That's interesting. So this is such an interesting job. So remind us your title.
I'm the Fort Worth Film Commissioner.
Okay. So how did you end up doing that?
I actually started as an intern. I was at TCU in college studying film right when the Film Commission was launched. And I was working at a different production company. And my boss at the time helped launch the Film Commission and said, you should really, get involved. I'm sure that they're, working through a lot of growth right now. And it'd be just something cool to learn about. So I started as an intern going around taking photos of locations in the city. And after I graduated, they were able to hire me for a position as the film coordinator and just stayed with the company and had the opportunity to grow as we saw the film scene grow.
What a cool job. So that was your interest, like doing something in the like film and production industry?
Film and marketing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that is so neat. Do you have a team or is it largely spearheaded by you?
We really benefit from the support of Visit Fort Worth, which is our parent company. So we have a marketing team that helps us, a sales sports services team, and we're all working really collaboratively. Film specific, we have 2 full-time employees.
Very cool. Well, I always like to wrap up with a fun question, but anything else you'd like to add on any of this that you feel like we didn't cover?
I think another thing that's been really cool to see is just the supporting businesses that have popped up in the past 10 years. We have the largest volume stage at Trilogy Studios, which is right next to where Dr. Phil is now filming his TV show in North Fort Worth. We also have this really cool experience at the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History. It's the Omni Theater, which is an 8K immersive viewing experience. So think about like the Sphere in Las Vegas. We're projecting these images that are just really immersive and showing films with this new technology. So I think it's been great to see how the city has embraced film and all these different opportunities to get involved from a screening perspective if you're not in the production specific world.
I love it. I think that that is some very cool work that you're doing. So I mentioned we always wrap with a fun question. And the fun question is, what would be like one bucket list item that you would tell someone to do if they were visiting Fort Worth for the first time? Could be like something a little bit off the beaten path, maybe.
Well, my favorite thing to do in Fort Worth is the two-stepping at Billy Bob's. It's the world's largest honky tonk. I grew up kind of in the arts and dance and storytelling, so that was my favorite thing to do when I was in college. I'd go every week on Thursday nights and just spend hours on the dance floor under this rhinestone saddle that they use as kind of like a disco ball, and it's just a very Fort Worth experience and so much fun.
That is so fun. Is that like line dancing?
You can do both. Two-stepping is more of like a partner dance, but they also have great line dancing too.
Gotcha. So they teach you a little bit.
You can go to free lessons, I believe, on Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Okay. That is so neat. Well, thank you so much, Taylor. This was a great interview, and I really appreciate you taking some time to share this story.
It was so great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Livability Podcast, where we take you inside America's best cities. At Livability, we highlight the unsung awesomeness of small and mid-sized cities across the country. We also partner with communities to reach their target companies and potential residents through digital content and print magazine programs. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, and review this show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also learn more about us at livabilitymedia.com. Have an idea for an upcoming episode? Email me at aellis@livability.com. Until next time, from Livability, I'm Amanda Ellis, sharing the stories of America's most promising places.